As you go through a book, here we go, Brother Bill, confession kind of thing. As you go through a book, we get to like Ephesians 1:7. I probably said, this is the most important verse in this passage. And then you get to like 1:13. And you know what I probably said? This is the most important verse in this passage. And then you get to like 2, 8, 9, and 10. And I guarantee you what I said is, this is the most important verse we've got to yet. And then you get to 3, 14, 15, 16, all the way to 21. You know, the turn the car part on. And I probably said for 3 weeks, this is the most important part we got to yet. And then, you know, you get the worthy walk. And then what does the worthy walk look like? What does it encompass? And Justin, probably every week, you know what I said? This is the most important part yet. Guess what this morning? Ephesians 5, verse 18 is one of those crucial verses in the entire New Testament. This is not one of the most important verses yet. This is one of the most important verses, end of statement. Because everything that we have talked about is only possible. It's only possible for us to walk the worthy walk because of Ephesians 5:18. If we would take Ephesians 5:18 out, then we'd be really smart people who are still living in the flesh and are frustrated all the time because we can't accomplish what we know we should be. So Justin, when it says, this is who you are, this is how you shall be, this is what that walk looks like, that's only possible because Ephesians 5:18. And be not drunk with wine, wherein is excess, but be filled with the Spirit. This is a very familiar verse. It's incredibly important because this is how we walk. In fact, in Galatians chapter 5, which is, I don't know if I gave Eric these verses. In Galatians chapter 5, which is probably 4 pages back, Galatians chapter 5, it is said this way. It's not said be filled with the Spirit. In 5:16 it says, this I say then, walk in the Spirit. Okay, and you can jump down to verse 18, but if ye be led of the Spirit, you can then jump into, where is it, verse 25? Verse 25, if we live in the Spirit. This whole picture, Brother Maddox, it's encompassing. This is who we are. Ephesians 1 through Ephesians 3. But you know how you live out who you are? It's in the Spirit. We walk in the Spirit. We're led by the Spirit. We live out the Spirit. Anything outside of that, we're back into this picture of struggling and flesh. Now, it's because of this, Bill, this is a very well-known passage. You know what that means? That means that Ephesians 1:1, you know where I knew we would end up? Ephesians 5:18. And because of that, we have tried very hard to take a look at this book. As we pull each puzzle piece out, Justin, it's been exactly that, a puzzle piece. And if you put together a puzzle, you know, you're looking at what's on the edges. You're trying to figure out how it fits in. You're not pulling that thing out and describing just what's in there. You're trying to keep it in the focus of the entire puzzle. And we've worked very hard to do that. From the very beginning, we started to introduce this analogy of a car. And this is how it goes. In chapters 1 through 3, again, to keep everything in perspective, chapters 1 through 3, it tells us about the car. Now, for some of you, that might be very boring. Miss Maddox, for me, that is exciting. I want to know its stopping distance. I want to know its horsepower. I want to know its torque. I want to know its horsepower to weight ratio. Donnie, I want to know. I want to know its 0 to 60. I want to know its gas mileage. I want to know everything I can about that. And that's what Ephesians 1 through 3 is. Let me tell you about your makeup. Let me tell you who you are. Let me tell you about your inheritance. Let me tell you about your resurrection power. Let me tell you about the love you've received. Let me tell you about who you are. Then it gets to chapter 3, verse 14. And Miss Pat, in 3:14, it tells you how to turn that thing on. This is who you are, so let's go through the ignition sequence. And hopefully we remember that, and every day we're waking up and we're trying to live in that. Because that ignition sequence, you got to start the car. That ignition sequence starts with strengthening ourselves in the inner man by the Spirit. And then, Justin, it goes from there, remember, and Christ becomes at home. And when he's at home, we now have the understanding of the love of Christ. And then we have the fullness of God, and then what happens? Above what we're able to think or dream or ask, God's going to do that in our life. So now this thing is running. Then you get to chapter 4, and we have the worthy walk. The worthy walk is a humble walk. It's a unified walk. But it's not just unified. It's a different kind of walk. It's different than the way we used to walk. It's a loving walk. It's a walk in the light. It's a walk that's wise. And this would be the picture of how you drive the car. Here's the car. Here's what it is. Here's how you start it. Now, this is how you drive it. Or maybe where you drive it. Maybe it's the map. You pick whichever picture you want. They'll both fit. And then you get to, and everything's just running along. And Brother Wayne, if we get to chapter 6, now we're jumping over 5:18. But if you get to chapter 6, you're going to get to chapter 6, and you're going to find out there's some roadblocks on this map. In fact, there's some wickedness in high places. There's some, let's meet Satan. And now, if we're going to keep driving along, we have to put on the whole armor of God. And that's this whole picture. Except for, where does 5:18 fit in? Well, 5:18 is the fuel that goes in the car. And if we don't put any fuel in the car, we're going nowhere. I remember this picture. I don't remember where. It's from one of those sermons, Brother Doug. I probably heard in chapel when I was 16. But there was a picture, and they used the picture of an Amish farmer. I guess Amish means farmer. That's probably, that's how else you're going to live if you're Amish. But it was a picture of an Amish farmer who had won a car. How many of you seen the picture? So he takes the car. He can't start it up, Treva. He takes the car. He hooks it up to his horses. He is cruising around town in style. He never puts any gas in it, and he never starts it up. Now, that is a hilarious picture, unless you finish the analogy and tie it to some Christians and how we live. And so, when we get to 5:18, this is the picture of putting the gas. We've been given, Doug, you'll like this. Doug, I've only heard you preach a couple of times. But I think the first time I ever heard you preach, you used this thought. You used it from James and referenced it back in Ephesians. But we've been given all the gifts in the heavenlies. Everything's good and comes down from the Father of lights. There's the passage in James. Brother Hamilton, we've been given all the gifts of the heavenlies. But the only way to open them up, the key that opens them up, that allows us to live them out, that allows it to be who we are, that allows the engine to run like it's supposed to and accomplish the things it's supposed to in our life, is to be filled with the Spirit. And then we have some results. There are some results to being filled with the Spirit. Chapter 5, verse 19. But if you be led by the Spirit, verse 18. Oh, no, that's Galatians. I knew those verses were in the wrong spot. 5:18, be not drunk with wine wherein is excess, but be filled with the Spirit. Some results. Filled with the Spirit, we'll be speaking to ourselves in psalms and hymns and spiritual songs, singing, making melody in your heart to the Lord. That is a good result. That is the opposite of stress and depression and tore down and lack of direction. Giving thanks always for the things unto God. Brother Maddox, that's grateful. That is a totally different view than the view the world has today of their life. Okay? That is the result of being filled with the Spirit. There's also some results of being filled with the Spirit that affect others. Because verse 21 through the end of this passage is going to talk about we're going to have a submissive spirit. That affects how you and I deal with each other. In fact, it goes so far as to say it's going to affect how you deal inside the home. Chapter 6 begins with walking in the Spirit is going to have an effect how we as children deal with parents. Because it has an effect how parents deal with children. It goes on further in that passage. Treva, it says it's going to affect how we deal with our boss. Here's the part I don't like about that. It does not tell me I'm always going to have a good boss. It tells me how I'm going to respond to the boss, one way or another. See, this being filled with the Spirit has a huge effect on our life. This fuel changes the way we live. Because, Justin, to keep that analogy, we're no longer walking by the power of the flesh. That picture of the Amish farmer, that horse, we might as well just, you know what the horse's name is? Probably had to be 2 horses, because cars, a ton and a half. Small car. those team of horses had to be called the flesh. Okay, when we have fuel, we're no longer being powered by the flesh. We're no longer making those decisions, those self-wisdom decisions. I don't even know if you can call it self-wisdom, because we just went through a whole passage that says that's foolishness. But in our mind, when we're making those decisions, we think we're pretty smart. We're no longer powered in that way. Now we're powered by the Spirit of God. And that is the final step of this picture of the wise walk. In fact, if you go back and look at verse 18, look at how verse 18 starts. Justin, it starts with "and." You know what that does? That links it back to the things we just got done looking at. Starts in verse 15. See that you walk circumspectly, not as fools, redeeming the time, understanding what the will of the Lord is. And here's that final piece to stick in there. Doug, if you want a picture of the wise walk. The wise walk realizes there is a specific way. The wise walk realizes you must redeem the time. I should have said this last week, by the way, and I didn't. It bothered me for a couple days. Then I forgot, honestly. But for a couple days, it really bothered me, Brother Maddox. I made this statement. And by the way, I'm not stepping back from this statement. This is a true statement. You know what? We only have a certain period of time as parents with children. You better redeem that time. But let me tell you, we have a good God. You know what he is? He's the God of second chances. And he often, if not always, often gives new beginnings. But at some point, we must start redeeming the time in the way that we know there is. And then it goes on from that point. It says, understanding what the will of the Lord is, living in the will of God. Okay, so that sounds pretty wise. But now he adds in verse 18, and being filled with the Spirit. Because the only way you can do 1, 2, and 3 is being led by the Spirit. Walking in the Spirit, living in the Spirit. The three pictures that come from Galatians chapter 5. So, I'm going to do this too. Donnie, if I have the remote, nobody in my house wants to watch TV. Because, everybody who used to watch TV with me is now gone. There will be one of three things on. Sports. Angie's in the other room. Jonathan likes to play sports, but I can't get that guy to watch 5 minutes of any sport. Really, I failed in that area. So it'll be sports, cooking shows, which I don't know why that is, but it is. It's so I can be critical and make sure everything's made right in the flesh. Or car shows. In fact, Top Gear, those three dummies from England, I just love Top Gear. But Top Gear, Car and Driver, Motor Trend, I record them, watch them, find them on the web. I watch them all the time. I love to keep up with the most powerful car. This one races that one. I believe right now the most powerful car, once again, is a Bugatti Chiron. Now, they lost a little while to a hybrid made from Porsche. But I believe it's the Bugatti Chiron. The Bugatti Chiron has 11 radiators, so it can keep everything cool. It is an 8-liter, 16-cylinder engine with 4 turbos. It produces over 1,500 horsepower. It has been clocked at 304 miles, .773, and the 773 matters when you're competing. They say in the articles that it can go 0 to 60 in 2.3 seconds, but when the different companies have tested it, they've gotten it at 2.2 and one got it at 2.1. So, we'll say 2.2 in the middle. And it costs over $3 million. Now, Justin, if you had that car and hooked it up to a team of horses, I would call you the biggest fool ever. I'm going to tell you that car and all the horsepower it can produce is nothing compared to the power that is inside the Christian. Next to the Trinity, the Christian is the most powerful thing in the universe. Scrooge, that's the truth. We are the most powerful thing in the universe inside of you and I. It's God himself. And when we're walking in the Spirit, he's leading, directing, and empowering. Now here's the verse. Who can stand against that? What can stand against that? What is more powerful than God? It's a good time for silence. So Justin, the most powerful thing in the world, and we want to hook it up to the horse of our flesh. It is frustrating. So, Brother Bill, this is a good time for us to jump right in and talk about being fueled up, right? It's a good time for us to talk about, what it looks like to be filled in the Spirit. But we'll start that next week. Because before you get there, there's a phrase in front. Now, Justin, I did all that not to be funny, but because you got to keep the puzzle piece in the right place. Okay, you want to look at it in context. But in context, before we start looking there, you have this phrase, be not drunk with wine, wherein is excess. Now this continues this contrast, which goes all the way back to chapter 4. And Doug, we can't miss that contrast or we'd be missing the puzzle piece. Remember back in chapter 4, it talks about don't lie, walk in the truth. It talks about don't steal, work. And not only do you work, but work so you can give. And then it goes on to talk about, in chapter 5, it starts talking about not the counterfeit love of the world has, but real love, not darkness, but light, not foolishness, but wise. Now here it is, not drunk, but spirit. So, at first it's like, not drunk, but spirit. How does this exactly fill in? Let me do this. I'm not going to get sidetracked and talk about alcohol. That would take about 3 weeks probably. And that's not trying to be funny. I mean, when you talk about alcohol, let me tell you, you want to cause a division in any group, you talk about alcohol, you're going to cause a division. Okay, there's basically 3 different thoughts that are going to come out, basically, because there's everything you can imagine and make up in between these 3. But on one side, Brother Bill, there's going to be on one side, and let me tell you this too, by the way. You might think this is who knows that this guy over here is opinionated. I just want you to know Miss Pat's still laughing. Doug, I understand you're very opinionated. In fact, I don't think that's the wrong thing. I think when we study, we should have opinions. All right, he's leading us in that way. But you might think this is a very weak way for me to look at this. Okay, and that's okay. We could debate that. I've looked at this for a long time. I'm very comfortable in this position. This is how I would stay. You would not offend me with whatever opinion you come up. So, if truthfully, if we want to do this, anybody in here can do this. But when it comes to talking about pretty much anything, Brother Bill, if you ask me the question, is this wrong? Stick whatever you want to. Is this a sin? Well, really, this is how I look at it. This is my belief. I believe if we spent more time trying to just do what is right instead of so much time trying to find out exactly what is wrong, what's wrong takes care of itself. Because here you go, Brother Maddox. If you are doing what is right, humble, love, unity, study, service, if you're doing what is right, here you go, led by the Spirit, I believe he's a much better teacher than I am. I believe he's much more capable of conviction than I am. I believe he loves you more than I ever will. And I believe it is his goal to bring you from here to there, which includes growth, which includes sanctification, which includes holiness. So if you asked me, is this right or is this wrong, I'm probably going to give you a whole bunch of things to look at. Because if you are honestly seeking God's will, I believe he's going to help you find it. And if you're not, I'd be wasting my time trying to argue with you. So in this picture, when you start talking about alcohol, let me tell you, I've got strong opinions. I'll answer it this way. Brother Jeremy, do you believe you should drink? I don't drink. Now, outside of that, I got a whole bunch of verses for you to look at and come back and talk to me. And then after that, I'll come up with a whole lot more. But there is one thing that definitely you can't even argue. Drunk. No drunk. In fact, Eric, I think I gave you this verse. I said I wasn't going to do this, but here I go. Yeah, give me 1 Timothy. If you go down this path, preacher, I know you don't intentionally go down this path, but I know a lot of people want to take you down this path. So I know a bunch of times what happens is two things get said. Well, if we're going to talk about drinking, if we're going to talk about wine, Jesus made wine, and Paul told Timothy to drink wine. I want you to notice this verse. Again, I'm not spending on. We're going to move fast here, I hope. Drink no longer water, but use a little wine. I want you to notice that word. It does not say drink wine. He does not say drink wine. He did not say, Timothy, drink a little wine with your steak. Timothy, have a little wine with your chicken wings. He said, Timothy, use wine like a medicine. And I would turn this the same way if we're talking about drugs. No, I'm not taking drugs to relieve me of my stresses and pressures, to find peace, to escape, to run away, to find joy. In fact, that is a counterfeit of where we're supposed to go. But will I take drugs? I will use drugs to help me in situations where I am sick. Notice what Paul said. Everyone say, Paul told Timothy to drink. No, he did not. He said, when you're sick, because you have no refrigeration, and bacteria runs amok during your time, you know what kills bacteria? Alcohol. He said, go ahead, take a little. Take some medicine, the best medicine of the time. Anyway. I got to get back on track. When you jump into this picture here and people start to argue for the right to drink, you know, it's what are you arguing for? And usually the argument is, I want this to help me escape from my problems. I want this to find joy. I want this to find peace. And Doug, in that aspect, it is such an easy conversation because all of those things come from yielding to the Spirit. This is just an offering of counterfeit from the great counterfeiter to say, chase this instead. And so there is this section here, and there is this way. Now, I want to look at this contrast in three different ways. And here's one. And I believe this fits, or I wouldn't do it. But I believe here this is a counterfeit that has been given to mankind to say, Brother Wayne, you know what? God wants you to be happy. Do you know God wants you to be happy? God wants you to have joy. In Ecclesiastes, you know what he tells you? He tells you, Brother Wayne, there's a time to laugh. In Proverbs, he tells you, a merry heart does good like a medicine. In 1 John, John would write, I write unto you, my little children, that your joy might be full. I think it's verse 4. Might be 3 now, I've forgotten. Paul would write, rejoice again and again. I'm telling you, rejoice. He wants that for you. Jesus came to bring us good tidings of great joy. He wants us to have joy. He wants us to have peace. He wants us to have direction. But Doug, those things come from surrendering and walking in and living in and being led by the Spirit, not the counterfeit that's being offered here. Intoxication fixes nothing. In fact, Bible illustrations of intoxication. And there's more, but I just grabbed some I think we all know about. Well, one we probably don't know, but I really love that story. Noah got drunk, and he acted shamelessly. Lot got drunk. He committed incest. Nabal. I love Nabal. Nabal's a perfect picture of man in the flesh. Nabal's wife, Abigail, is, I believe, one of the most spiritual women pictured in the Bible. Nabal got drunk, and he ended up dying. Belshazzar got drunk, and he mocked God, and his kingdom was torn away from him. Everywhere in the Bible, we see drunkenness. It's followed with sexual behavior, immorality, reckless behavior, destruction. 1 Corinthians chapter 5 talks about us not even fellowshipping with the drunkard. One of the great pictures here when we look at 5:18 is to see alcohol contrasted with the Spirit, alcohol being presented as a substitute of what the Spirit should do for us. I believe that's a good picture. Second, I believe there's a good contrast to go this way, and I have taught both of these in detail. But I believe there's a good picture to talk about this. If you get pulled over, you don't get pulled over being a drunk, you get pulled over for being under the influence. So I believe there's a good Justin, I believe this contrast fits. Okay, are you going to be under the influence of alcohol? Or are you going to be under the influence of the Spirit? Who's controlling you? Who are you yielding to? Who are you looking for to provide those things? I believe there's a good contrast picture there, and I believe that would fit. But I believe there's a more particular contrast that really for their time fits. And this is one of those things. Eric, this is one of those things I was going to skip over again. Man, I was. I mean, I don't want to go into all this. This just sounds crazy. But this week, I had somebody in this same picture basically trying to tell me when they're smoking pot, they feel like they can be closer to the Lord, more spiritual, more free. The burdens of the world are moved away. Yeah. Now, you said that's a crazy idea. Well, I really do believe the direct contrast that was being contrasted right here is that one. Okay, because at this time, this drunken, crazy, sensual frenzy was part of pagan worship. It's exactly what would happen in any Roman temple and any Grecian temple. In fact, we know we can trace this back to Babylon, and we believe we can trace it all the way back to the Tower of Babel. It has always been part of counterfeit religion. So when he begins to this is one of those crazy things. 10 years old, sitting back there, probably playing a football, paper football. All of a sudden, the preacher says, temple prostitutes. It's like, what's he talking about? Try to figure it out for like 30 seconds, go back to paper football. But that's one of, Brother Maddox, we say like that, like that's nothing. We read in the prophets, we say that phrase, we mention that like it's nothing. But it wasn't nothing, it was real. This is part of the religion. To come in a frenzy, to work yourself up, to get tied up in all sensualism, and get drunk as you can be. In fact, if you, my dad was in Europe, so I traveled around. I got to go to some of the ruins of some of the temples. You can actually look up, probably the best temple is in, I think it's in Lebanon now, I can't remember. And I've never been to Lebanon, but you can go, and it's the truth, it's the same. They have the temple of Bacchus, which is there in Balak, B-A-L-E-K. Or if you look it up in Old English, it's B-A-A-L-E-K, Baal. Balak. And in there's 3 temples. The biggest temple is the temple to Bacchus. And that temple is built like this, on a slope. The inside floor is not flat. It is sloped. And it has troughs on the outside so that all the vomit that comes from the intoxication will naturally roll to the end and not be stuck on the floor, because it was part of what happened. It was the worship. So when he starts right here, he's talking about what you know and what you see and what you've been taught. It's not that way. That is not how you fellowship. That is not how you commune with the God. You know how you commune with God? He lives here. You commune with God by being full of the Spirit, being full of what's there, by strengthening yourself in the inner man through the Spirit. by letting Christ become at home, because all of that other stuff is emptied out, by being full of the fullness of God, all the way back to the ignition in 3:14, 15, 16, 17. The result of that, greater than you could see or do or ask. He's contrasting the religion of the time. Oh. Copied out of a book. Pretty sure you know this is me. Chicken scratch, nobody can read. This is book. It is scary how close sometimes the counterfeit is. Here you go. Looking up this you'll see in a minute. The great god of Greek mythology was a god we know as Zeus. Zeus was the great and mighty god, a god who was great and known as all-powerful. Scary already. Zeus somehow implanted his productive ability into Semele, who, let me tell you, there's two pictures here. You'll see. As we get it, it'll make sense. The first picture, the first story of this, what this happens, Semele was a lesser god. I don't know what a lesser god is, but Semele was a lesser god, and you're going to see what happens to her. In later stories, they fixed the obvious contradiction, and instead Semele wasn't a later god. She was a priestess, and she was killed by Zeus's jealous wife when he tricked her. But here you go. Zeus implanted his productive ability into Semele. Now, they did that without ever even meeting, because no one could even look on Zeus, because they would be instantly incinerated by his glory. They couldn't even look upon him. Sounds like a satanic counterfeit already. So Zeus and Semele never met, but Semele was carrying in her womb the child of Zeus. And Semele decided that she had the right to see the father. In the earlier version, she had the right to see him, so she goes in to see Zeus. In the later version, where they clean it up, Hera tricked her by saying, you can have anything you want. She asked to see Zeus, and she goes to see him. Semele decided that she had a right to see the father, so she entered into the presence of Zeus and was instantly incinerated in his presence, because no one can see his glory. Zeus, just in time, snatched up the body of the baby from the womb, yet unborn, and sewed it into his thigh, where it's going to grow. So Zeus sewed this baby into his thigh and carried the baby until its full term when it was born. Now the infant God was born and was destined by Zeus to rule over the earth. Well, on the earth, there were titans. See, in the original story, there's no humans left, which becomes the conflict. Humans haven't been created yet. So in the later story, they fixed it and made her a human and made her a priestess, actually. But on the earth, there were titans. And the titans kind of ruled earth. So when they saw that this son of Zeus was going to come and take over, they were upset. So they got hold of the baby, they tore him limb from limb, they actually cooked him, and then they ate him. But Zeus rescued the heart, swallowed the heart, and gave birth to the baby. Wow, this is like... I know this sounds crazy, but preacher, this almost makes more sense to me than evolution. I have to admit, I had a thing for Greek mythology when I was a kid, but it almost. All right. So the child was born after he swallowed it. I don't know how all that stuff works. I didn't want to read that much into it. I'd have to keep digging. He named the child Dionysus. Now that's important, because that word traces all the way back to Babylon. In almost every old, ancient religion, you can find this name. All right, let me jump down here. Dionysus was born. Now Zeus was mad at the Titans, so he blasted them all with lightning. And you know what happened? Their ashes became humans. That's how humans grew up. The human race came on earth. Now Dionysus was in control of the earth, and he wanted to be able to commune with mankind, so he developed a religion of ascendancy, where the human beings arose out of the ashes and were able to commune with him. This religion was full of wild music and dancing madness. There was sexual perversion, and finally, there was all this induced drunkenness, which ended up in them ascending and being able to commune with the gods. Now, I could go on and on and on. I sent Eric some pictures, but I don't want to. I really didn't. Preacher, I don't want to become wise in what was a mess. But I want you to understand, this is what was happening in the time Paul wrote that. In fact, you can go to Corinthians. I'll tell you, one of the problems with the Corinthians is they were never able to get away from that. You know, start looking in Corinthians chapter 5, chapter 6, chapter 10. These guys were trying to bring in constantly what they knew before salvation. And if drunkenness was part before, it was something they were struggling with now. And Paul says, this is totally opposed. Okay, this is not how you commune with God. In fact, look at the next couple of verses. You know, it was full of dancing and music and frenzy. Look what he says is the result of being filled with the Spirit. The result of being filled with the Spirit is psalms and hymns and spiritual songs, singing, making melody in your heart, giving thanks. Okay, it's not that craziness you were putting on in your drunkenness. This is the result. In fact, you can think in Acts chapter 2, 3, 4, when they were exhibiting the gifts of the Spirit. What did those around say? These men are drunk. Because that's how they looked. That was necessary. And he's trying to say, that's not only not necessary, it doesn't have any part of it. Don't be drunk. It doesn't have any part of it. I want to go through some of these verses real quick. Eric, that says 5 minutes. Let's just go through. I'm going to read them. Start with 1 Peter. 1 Peter. There we go. For time past of our life to suffice us have wrought the will of the Gentiles when we walked in lascivious lust, excess wine, revelings, banquetings, and abominable idolatries. I definitely can't do this fast. Preacher, you know what that says? That says the church should be full of people who used to be drunkards. Because that was our time past. In time past, there was revelings, there was banquetings, there was abominable idolatries. That's who we were, but that's not who we are now. 1 Thessalonians. Therefore, let us not sleep as do others, but let us watch and be sober. For they that sleep, sleep in the night, and they that be drunken are drunken in the night. That's in the dark. That's in the past. That's who we used to be. Now, we're day walkers. Now we're sober. But let us who are of the day be sober, putting on the breastplate of faith and love, and for an helmet, the hope of salvation. Boy, he's almost getting into that chapter 6 stuff, but we'll get there in a month or so. Proverbs. And then these are all very well-known verses. But wine is a mocker. Strong drink is raging, and whosoever is deceived thereby is not wise. Now, this is in the picture of the wise walk. It's the last clip of the wise walk. Be not drunk, but be filled with the Spirit. Wine is a mocker, strong drink is raging. Wine mocks. It mocks God. It mocks who we are. It deceives us. It puts us in foolishness. It is hard to argue anything but wine is a mocker. Proverbs 23. Proverbs 23 is a tough chapter if you're gonna try to argue for pro-drink. Hear thou, my son, and be wise, and guide thine heart in the way. Be not among wine bibbers. See, this is why it's tough. Because it does not say, be not among drinkers. Be not among the drunkard. It says, be not among those who go after wine, among riotous eaters of flesh. 23:29. This is where it really gets bad. Here you go. These are rhetorical questions, by the way, Brother Justin. Who hath woe? Who hath problems? You got problems? You know who has problems in their life? Who has sorrow in their life? Let me tell you who has sorrow in life. Who hath contentions? Who's fighting all the time? Who's always full of struggle? Who's babbling? Well, besides me. Who hath wounds without cause? Wounds without cause. You know, you wake up in the morning, you don't even remember where that bruise came from. You don't remember how the front of your car got crashed. till you drive down the road and see a pole half down. There's no reason for it. It's just there. You don't know why. Who hath redness of eyes? They that tarry long at the wine. They that go to seek mixed wine. Keep going. Look not thou upon the wine when it is red, when it giveth its color in the cup, when it moveth itself aright. Now this is what happens. Okay, I've gone through this dozens of times, which is why I don't do it anymore. For Brother Bill, they'll get in an argument. Okay, see what this is? It's strong drink, because that's why it's moving. All right, I'm just going to go, whatever you want to tell me is okay. This is what I'm going to tell you. Don't even look at it. Okay, you can tell me whatever you want to after the rest of it. I'm going to tell you it's attractive, it's seductive, it lies, and as such, we're not even to look at it. I can handle it. Be wise, don't look at it. Well, that's your opinion. Okay? Eric, go back to the beginning of that. Go back to 29. Okay. Who hath woe? Who hath sorrow? Who hath contentions? Keep looking at it. Keep telling yourself you got this. This is what the life's going to be marked by. All right, I'm out of time. Give me Isaiah 28. We'll just read this and be done. Isaiah 28. There's actually a lot Isaiah says about wine. Why? Because the false temples were worshiping, and guess how they worshiped? With drunkenness. But they also have erred through wine. He's talking about the priests. They've erred. Wine is causing them to err. And through strong drink are out of the way. They're out of the way God wants them. The result of wine in their life has them out of God's will. The priest and the prophet have erred through strong drink. They are swallowed up of wine. They are out of the way through strong drink. They err in vision. They stumble in judgment. One more. For all tables are full of vomit and filthiness, so that there is no place clean. Here's what he says, Brother Wayne. Very important. Live your life. You need this key of the Spirit. But first, there's a contrast. Be not drunk with wine. Next week, we'll start going on. Brother Doug, you close in a word of prayer.